Woo! Full frame lenses! Spend all that money! You'll notice there's no money here. And that's because I don't have enough to buy the full frame glass that professionals use. Most people, I would gather, do not. Now, up until very recently, that was probably the biggest hindrance in terms of upgrading to full frame, at least for me, who was a Sony APS-C shooter. The A7C, when it first launched, really appealed to me because the size and weight was very comparable to the APS-C cameras I was shooting. And, you know, the fact that you get full frame quality in that camera was amazing. And also the autofocus improvements, etc., etc. However, if I wanted to get a kit that was similar to what I had, so I had the Sigma 30mm f1.4, the Sigma 16mm f1.4, and the Tamron 17-70 f2.8. Before that was the Sony 18-135. Now, if I wanted similar optical quality, similar low light performance, and a similar well-rounded kit like I had, I would have had to spend, probably close to 10 grand, right? Canadian dollars. And, you know, every lens would weigh like freaking 8,000 pounds or something. So it didn't appeal to me very much because I didn't want to carry all that weight. Recently, a third-party manufacturer has been doing some very interesting work for Sony full frame. And we're looking at one of those lenses today. That lens is the Samyang, or in my case, Rokinon. They're the same. For those of you who don't know, Samyang is the parent company. Rokinon is the brand they sell their products under in North America and other markets. The Rokinon 35mm f1.8 lens is what we're looking at today. I'm going to give you my thoughts on it after using it for a couple weeks. Spoiler alert, it's stayed on my camera most of the time. Obviously, I'm not using it right now, but it is a fantastic little lens. I'll show you some sample images. I'll show you what I liked, what I disliked. But first, I'm going to show you what comes in the box and what you get for the teeny tiny price that you pay. Check it out. Okay, so here we have the box that the Rokinon 35mm f1.8 comes in. Let's have a look here. I don't anticipate there to be much included over here. A little foam cover. And that's pretty much it. You're looking at it. So we've got one piece of documentation, which I guess is the manual. And a nice little case here that the lens comes in. It's a hard leather / plastic case with a little zipper. So a nice little bonus that it comes with a case like that. Inside the case, we've got the lens covered in plastic along with a plastic lens hood, which is fairly cheap, but it'll do the job. And inside the plastic, you get the lens itself. And there it is. You got the two lens caps, electronic connections because this is an autofocus lens. And that's pretty much all that comes in the box. So nice little package for this lens. And given that it's so compact and you can throw it into a pocket or a bag that's not necessarily a camera bag, having this little case is actually quite handy. And you know, it could fit other lenses too. And it's quite sturdy. So nice little package here from Rokinon with the nice plastic case and the lens for not a whole lot of money considering what you get. So that's pretty much it for the unboxing. Let's check out the sample images now. So here we are with the sample images. Now I'm going to use these images to try and highlight different aspects of the lens and the lens camera combinations, I guess. They're all going to be done in RAW except for the last subset, which is comparing lenses. Those will be done in JPEG, but for now we're going to stick to RAW. In this case, it was shot wide open at f1.8 ISO 640 1/800 on the A7C, of course. And this is to showcase the animal eye autofocus, which works beautifully on this lens. I didn't see a difference between this and the native Sony 20mm that I have. Both focused equally as quickly and equally as accurately, especially in decent light like this. And what's interesting here is that Trixie's face is a little challenging here because it's quite long, right? So I know with my A6400 and the Sigma 30mm f1.4, it had a little bit more trouble picking up the eye than this combination did. So as you can see, everything's super sharp, super clean, really, really nice image. So yeah, autofocus wise, no issues here. This one here is to showcase the lens, also on the A7C again. This time we're at 1/1250 f1.8 ISO 100. So keep in mind these are wide open shots here. And what's interesting about this one is it was shot using clear image zoom. So it's a little more punched in, and even with that, you can see there's an impressive amount of detail here. I mean, you can even see the water beating on the duck, right? So really, really impressive performance by this lens, even with capturing the detail on the feet and everything, right? So really, really nice imagery here. You can start to see a little bit of chromatic aberration creep up here above the head. And I'm going to show you guys more samples of that. It is one of the drawbacks of this lens, but it's easily fixable in Lightroom, of course. Now here, despite the fact that I actually didn't align the building properly, just to give you an idea of what kind of distortion, or I would say lack thereof, you're facing, there are no lens corrections applied on these photos, by the way, because a profile does not yet exist in Lightroom, which is the bad news. But the good news is the distortion on the 35mm f1.8 is not so bad. So as you can see, the lines, other than me holding the camera a little crooked, are pretty straight, both vertically and horizontally. So not a whole lot of distortion to speak of with this lens, which is nice. This is just a little landscape photo to give you guys an idea of corner to corner sharpness, this time at f2.8. And as you can see, there is an impressive amount of sharpness and detail across the frame. Even as we move into the corners here, it gets a little touch softer in the top left corner over there, but not by much. I mean, it's a pretty good performance by this lens. I mean, there's really not a whole lot to complain about in terms of image quality here, right? And here's another little landscape photo at f5.6 this time, at 1/13. Also at 800. So even if we go over in the corners and the sides, you can see there's still an impressive amount of detail in the trees and the leaves, other than the possible depth of field issues. You can see the chromatic aberration that I was talking about up here in the top left corner, and you'll probably also notice it along the branches over here, and of course in the corners where it does get a little bit worse. But again, these are easy things to correct in Lightroom, right? So but in terms of sharpness and image quality, there is a ton of detail to work with here. So really, really nice image quality from this lens on the A7C. And just to give you an idea, with slightly lower light at f8 this time, 1/20, a little bit of a darker scene, but still an impressive amount of detail again. And I always like photos with leaves and trees to test lenses out, because you can really get a sense of the amount of detail and how it falls apart or not in the corners as you scroll along, right? And now we're going to be showcasing a little bit of the depth of field capabilities of this lens. This one is shot at f2.8, so not wide open, but close. And you can see the leaves in the foreground are nicely blurred out. There are elements in the background that's nicely blurred out, and the subject is perfectly in focus, no issues there, even shooting through bushes, right? So it managed to capture focus quite accurately, quite quickly here. Not too many issues. You see, again, a little touch of chromatic aberration coming out here, but not super noticeable. But yeah, image quality wise, no complaints here. And now we're going to get into some macro-like shots just to show you the close focusing capability. So here, it was kind of a fluke. I was actually trying to get the photo of the flower here, and this little guy kind of landed on it and gave me the chance to get some bug photos. Now, it is a 35mm lens, and you are limited to how close you can get. The close focusing distance on this, by the way, is 0.29 meters or 0.95 feet, so just under a foot. And you can see that, you know, when you punch into something like this, the detail isn't as good as, let's say, a macro lens or one of the Tamron lenses that allows you to focus super closely, right? So, but still, it allows you to get some interesting shots nonetheless. And I'm quite happy with something like this for casual shooting. So not too bad, not too bad. So this is another interesting one. And now, what impressed me about this shot, and at first glance, you're like, okay, it's a bunch of leaves, you know, it's quite sharp, there's decent detail, corner to corner, whatever. There's a couple of things that I'm going to use in this shot to show you guys. One is obviously the chromatic aberration, which we've talked about before in the corners. This is shot at f11, so as you can see, it doesn't get a ton better in the corners as you stop down. but especially with high contrast areas like this. But you know, again, it's easy to fix. But what's more interesting to me is I was trying to focus through a bunch of trees and leaves here on this guy right here. And impressively, the lens camera combination, the A7C with this lens, actually focused in on him. And if I actually move in and punch into 200%, you can see that there's actually, you know, a decent amount of sharpness here for this kind of zoom, right? So kind of impressive in terms of punching in to that extent. Just to give you guys an idea of what this lens looks like at f4, you can still get some decent depth of field if you're close to your subject. And of course, the level of detail, oh, I left that zoom on 100%, didn't I? On 200%, sorry. And of course, here, what's impressive is you can see the level of detail on the tree bark is very, very impressive. I mean, this is at ISO 3200, by the way, just so you guys know what it looks like as you crank up the ISO a little bit. Here's another shot at f4, this time of some mushrooms here. And as you can see, again, really impressive amount of detail, nice depth of field. I could have gone a little wider with the aperture. But even at ISO 2500, man, really nice imagery with this lens. And I really like the color rendition too. The greens are really poppy but not unnatural looking. So really impressive performance here. And this is my ugly mug to give you an idea of what portraits might look like. Obviously I was by myself, so I didn't have a chance to test it out in a proper portrait environment. But again, the eye autofocus with humans worked very well. As you can see, good sharpness. This is shot wide open, and it does get sharper as you stop down, which is nice, but still impressive image quality. You can see an impressive amount of detail, razor thin depth of field, of course, because I'm holding the camera super close to my face. Even wide open, it gives you a nice depth of field, a nice subject separation for portraits, so gives you an idea of what it looks like. Here's another shot showcasing the somewhat macro capability, or close focusing capability, I guess. This is shot at f4.5 at ISO 800. And as you can see, once again, you do get the chromatic aberration coming out here in the high contrast areas on the legs of the spiders. But the amount of detail is really impressive. I mean, the texture on the leaves, and you'll notice the texture on the spiders' bodies and stuff like that. So really, really nice amount of detail here. Okay, so this should be an interesting comparison. Now, what's unique about this comparison is we are looking at the Sigma 30mm f1.4 APS-C lens for Sony cameras, which used to be one of my favorite lenses. Incredible sharpness, very nice depth of field with the f1.4, etc., etc. I'm sure a lot of you know that lens quite well. Versus the Samyang 35mm f1.8, in my case Rokinon, but same difference. And what's interesting here is I shot both of these on the A6000, so it's a fair comparison. Same settings on both cameras, except the Rokinon, of course, is at f1.8, and the Sigma, of course, is at f1.4. Same lighting conditions and everything. And basically, the reason I took these shots is because knowing that the Sigma is as sharp as it is, it's one of the sharpest Sony APS-C lenses you can get, I really wanted to get a sense of how good the sharpness was on the Rokinon in comparison, right? And as you punch in, you can see the Sigma is a little bit brighter because it's at f1.4 with the other settings being the same. But in terms of sharpness performance, there's really not much to choose between these two. And I would argue if you go into the areas of brighter colors, sort of like this blue sort of piece of material looking thing in the pillows here, you can see there's a touch more detail on the Rokinon / Samyang, and even in the leaves over here, right? So this is another comparison between the Rokinon, Samyang, and the Sigma, this time at the closest focusing distance. So this kind of gives you an idea of how close you can get with either lens. It's about the same, maybe a touch closer with the Samyang because of the 35mm, but no real huge difference in terms of close focusing. Again, the Sigma is brighter because of the f1.4. And as we let the images fully load here, you'll notice that with the closest focusing, the Rokinon is significantly sharper, I would say. You can see it in the lines over here on the yellow. You can see it in the hair as well. Not that it's a huge difference, but again, very impressive result for the Rokinon against the Sigma here. Now, if you're curious to see the difference between using this lens on full frame versus APS-C, This is what we're comparing here. So the A6000 using the Rokinon 35mm f1.8 is on the left. The A7C is on the right. Otherwise, the shutter speed is a little bit different, 1/40 versus 1/60. Both at f1.8, both at ISO 400, both in the same lighting conditions. You can see the A7C has a little bit more natural looking colors than the A6000. I don't think that's going to be a surprise to anyone. But as you can see, the performance of the lens itself on each camera body is very good. I mean, and it's a big benefit, and it's a reason why I chose this lens when I sold my Sigma 30 to move up to full frame, is that I can use this lens on both my A6000 and the A7C and get equally good results. So very impressive performance here, and you can see on the face here and on the hair the level of sharpness on both. So very impressive performance by this lens, guys. That kind of does it for the test shots here. Let me know in the comments down below what you think. Is this lens usable on both APS-C and full frame? And if so, would you consider buying it over something like the Sigma 30mm f1.4 if you did have a APS-C Sony camera? Because the nice thing, of course, is that when you move up to full frame, you don't have to buy different lenses, right? So let me know if you guys would make that choice given the fact that the performance is so similar here. Now, one of the things I absolutely love about this lens is how compact it is. I mean, look at that. That is small, and it's lightweight. It's about 230 grams. It weighs almost nothing. Another thing that I haven't seen many people mention in the reviews, but I personally like. So when I first got my A6000, my first upgrade lens was the Sigma 30mm f2.8 DN lens. So that's the older version, not the art version. And what was handy about it is the front element was super small. The opening was super small on the lens body itself, which meant that I didn't have to put any filters on it, and it was less likely to get scratched because it was so small and the odds of something hitting it were not as great, right? And this guy, if you guys can see it here, let's see if I can focus in on that. This guy has a relatively small lens element. I'd say it's a little bit bigger than a quarter. And I like that because I don't have to put a filter, aside from the fact the lens is not that expensive. So, you know, I'm not as worried about it as maybe something that costs thousands. But the lens element being this small means it's less likely something actually hits your element. And it also comes with, of course, the lens hood. And that gives you that extra tiny bit of protection for stuff hitting it dead on, right? So fantastic little package, lightweight. Easy to carry. You could fit it in a jacket pocket really easily, which is nice. And between this and the 75mm f1.8, which is the other one that I have, review coming soon, it's a nice little wide/telephoto package that can carry one lens in my pocket, one on the camera, and I'm pretty much covered for whatever I want to shoot, except for extreme telephoto or extreme wide angle, right? 35, 75, I mean, that's basically a standard zoom in two lenses. And I've really enjoyed using it. Another feature that I absolutely love, I don't use it a ton, but it's nice to have the option, is this little switch on the side here. On the lens, you'll notice it says mode 1, mode 2. And what's nice about this switch is that, first of all, you can customize it using Rokinon/Samyang's lens dock. So you can program whatever functionality you want to it. But out of the box, what it does is when you're on mode 1, it basically means that this ring, when you switch to manual focus, will be a focus ring, right? If you switch to mode 2, when you're on autofocus, this becomes an aperture ring. So it gives you an extra point of control on the lens, which is really nice to have. Now, the natural comparison for a lot of people is to compare this to the Sony 35mm f1.8 that came out not too long ago. The reason I chose the Samyang is twofold. Number one, after watching Christopher Frost's comparison of the two, and if you haven't seen that yet, I'm going to link in the screen somewhere and in the description below. Really, really in-depth, and it really helped me make my decision between the two. But the reason I chose this primarily is because, yes, the Sony has better build quality. I highly recommend you guys go check one out in the store. Really well-built lens. It feels nice in the hand. This doesn't feel quite as nice. That being said, it is the best feeling, I guess, of all the lenses in this lineup from Rokinon/Samyang. The other reason I chose it is because it is a tad sharper. Now, there is a little bit more chromatic aberration, so you should know that. But it is a tad sharper. And for me, the extra sharpness trumps the chromatic aberration because chromatic aberration is much easier to fix in post than trying to make something look sharper, right? Sharpening always kind of, I never liked the look of artificial sharpening in post-production. So having a sharper lens and softening it if I need to is a much better for my use case. And the other part is, of course, the price. I mean, this costs almost half the price of the Sony. If you find it on sale, it's probably less than half the price of the Sony. So that's a huge, huge benefit. And bonus, for me at least, I actually prefer the aesthetic of the Rokinon line of lenses than Sony's plain black matte finish. So something to consider. All in all, really good value lens. I would even go as far as to say, in terms of bang for your buck, it might be the best lens for Sony full frame cameras. And I know a lot of people will hum and ha about, oh, it's because you bought it and you're trying to justify your purchase. Yes. But independently of that, it's a fantastic value. I mean, I absolutely love it. I've enjoyed using it. Durability remains to be seen, of course, because it's still new for me. But I don't anticipate any issues. I mean, it feels solid enough. There's nothing flimsy about it, except for maybe the little switch on the side, which kind of feels a little plasticky. But aside from that, no complaints on the build quality in terms of my anticipation of it being durable. The other nice thing to mention about all these Rokinon lenses in this series, the 1.8 series, so you've got the 24mm, the 35mm, the 75mm, is the fact that they all take 58mm filters. So kind of like what Tamron did with the 67mm, you can buy one filter set for all your Rokinon Samyang lenses. And you know what? I'm really glad companies are doing this. I'm glad that we're not seeing what we often see from Sony, right? So one lens will have 49mm, another lens will have 52mm, another lens will have 60mm. I mean, enough is enough. Like, how many filters are we, gonna buy? And Sony doesn't even sell these filters. I mean, it's not like they're making a buck off it. What the hell, Sony? What the hell? Anyway, yes, so 35mm 1.8, fantastic lens. Highly, highly recommend if you are especially a Sony a7C shooter, but any of the Sony full frame cameras. I highly recommend you check this out. There will be a link in the description below if you want to check it on Amazon. Purchasing it there through my affiliate link costs you nothing, but helps me out and helps me to grow this channel. So thank you very much if you did make that purchase. So that's it for today's video, guys. I hope you enjoyed this review. I hope you got something out of it. If you did, please like this video and consider subscribing for more videos like this one and others. I don't know what yet because it's still early in the channel, but others. I promise there will be others. There will be others. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.